In 2020, I had the opportunity of preaching like beginning of the year messages at the church I was at. And like every pastor that year, I preached 2020 vision. And now I realize hindsight is 2020 because I was negligent and I spoke too soon. And I feel like we're still reeling from the disappointment of the last 2 years. And so tonight, this year, I want us to go. I feel like God is taking us into a year of getting out of and overcoming and getting into a season of, instead of surviving but thriving, instead of getting over disappointment, moving into a place where actually we're starting to get a groove, we're starting to find our identity, starting to become who God has called us to be. And so tonight I'm going to preach a message called The Destination of Disappointment. The Destination of Disappointment, because I think no matter who it is in life, we all face disappointment, regardless of who you are, regardless of the season of life that you're in. You face disappointment no matter what season of life and who you are. Disappointment does not discriminate. Why? Because we all have expectations. And we all have expectations, whether spoken or not. And when you get into relationships, especially marriage, things like unspoken expectations become way worse than spoken expectations, because you have an unspoken expectation, and then when it doesn't happen, the frustration comes. And so how many of y'all have ordered anything off of Amazon before in your life? Anybody? Yeah, I know, I get it. They're probably the Antichrist. I'm going to put chips in our hand. I get it. I've seen the YouTube videos, but I love Amazon. I love Amazon. One thing I don't love about Amazon, though, is has anybody tried to call like the customer service of like Amazon or a big company? And what do you get? You don't get a real person. You get the robot. Bruh, I love technology. I love video games. I love the iPhone. I love Apple Watch. I went to the store last night, and my phone died. And because I am a child, I didn't bring my wallet. So if I would have got kidnapped, nobody would have known who I was. But I use Apple Pay for everything, and my phone died. Well, guess what? I had my Apple Watch, and my Apple Watch saved me, and I was able to get my groceries because of technology. It's incredible. But the worst part of technology, can I be honest, are these excuse my language, these freaking robots that you have to call. And when you call, they're like, press 1 for this, press 2 for this. And eventually you get to the point where you're just like, I just want to talk to a real person. And then eventually it gets to the point where it just hangs up on you. And so I don't like these robots. But we had a funny story happen to us one time. My wife, who is the sweetest and most incredible person in the world. Y'all give a hand to my beautiful wife, Adrienne. I often say, because this is reality, is that people tolerate me, they really love her. And I know a lot of y'all feel that way, and it doesn't offend me. It doesn't offend me. I'm an acquired taste. But we were driving back we were living in the Outer Banks at the time, and from the Outer Banks to Raleigh, to Duke Hospital, is a 3.5-hour drive. We had to make that drive so many times. I knew it like the back of my hand. My wife ordered something expensive on Amazon. How many of us have done that before? How many of us have Amazon Prime? Yeah, Amazon Prime. You get in like 2 business days? Are you kidding me? I made a purchase of like $5,000 one time, and it was there in 2 days. I was like, that blew my mind. Amazon is the greatest. I went to an Amazon store. This actually might be a problem. In Atlanta, Georgia. And I bought something for my son. When I bought something, they had all of my information because of my credit card. Then they had my email, and I think I even see my social security number on the screen. And I said, hold on, is this the CIA or is this Amazon? Like, this is a little unnerving. I think Big Brother was watching. And so Amazon is great. My wife made a purchase, but the package was like 3 weeks late. That's not like Amazon, right? You usually get it like pretty quickly, but it was late. And so my wife makes a mistake. She tries to call the customer service. My wife's a patient woman. She's not easily angered. I am. I'm not very patient. If you guys think I'm patient, it's because I've tricked you into believing so. I'm just, when technology and things like that don't go my way, I'm not very happy. But my wife, she usually is. So she called customer service. And they eventually get to the point where dial in your confirmation number, dial in the number that you have to for your order, whatever. And so she would try to say it. But every time she would get down the line and then press pound, they would say, couldn't recognize your number. She did this until enough to where it started to say, type it in. Type in the number of like the order you had. So she would type it in. And eventually it would get to the point where it wouldn't even recognize that. And so she would eventually have to go down the list of options. How many of y'all know, like when you get all the way down to option 9, you don't even know who would even call for like that last option, but you're just like hoping that it would give the option of speaking to a real person. So eventually she would hang up and she would call again, she would try over and over and over again. Eventually it got to the point where my wife, who's the sweetest woman in the world, she started raising her voice a little bit. She would start, when she would ring the phone, the automated voice would come on, she would start to say, real person, can I talk to a real person, please? And it wouldn't recognize what she was saying. And so it would hang up on her and say, goodbye, we'll end the call. And then she would call back. And every call, like, my wife is real feminine. She doesn't have a low octave, but her voice started to drop. She would call back and say, real person. And I just was like, heard that in the back of my, like, on the side, I was staring, I was a good driver. I was 10 and 2, watching the road. That's a lie. I had one hand on the wheel. But I was watching the road, and her voice started to drop. And every time, about the third time, her voice dropped so low, we had an issue. She started to say, real person. Literally, have you ever been in bed at night and you hear a noise? And that noise, like, listen, we all have this fight or flight mechanism, but I don't care how big you are. If you hear something at night, you put the covers over your head. And you're praying to God, I hope whoever's standing over my bed, if they are, doesn't see this big, large person, like in the bed underneath the covers. And you're just like shook. And you don't want whoever is in the room or whatever it is that made that noise to know you're there, to see you. You think it makes you invisible. I had one of those moments because when I was in the car. So I literally went from just chilling, listening to music. I turned the radio down so I could see better. And my wife, she was saying, real person. I literally was like frozen. Like I could not believe what was going on. And I know, and I'll admit I was a bad Pentecostal in this moment because what I should have done is notice the demonic manifestation that was happening in the car, and I should have turned around and went Rafiki Mufasa and ended the situation and that moment right there. But she kept going, real person, until a woman named Kayla answered the phone and said, hey, this is Kayla with Amazon customer service. Can I please help you? And my wife literally said, I need my package now. And like your favorite Screamo band. And my wife, Kayla was like, sure, I can help with that. Do you have the order number? And my wife literally started going down the order number like Z5X pound J. And she was like, I'm sorry, Kayla. I've been at this for 90 minutes with the robot. And she was like, Kayla was like, it's okay, I can help you. Can you just give me your order confirmation one more time, sir? And that's a funny story, but we all go through that. Muhammad Ali said, the worst punches that happen are the ones you never see coming. See, we all face disappointment because we have a thing we expect to happen, and it doesn't happen, and disappointment becomes through unfulfilled expectation. Whether it's you expected a certain relationship to go and that person cheated on you, and now you're left disappointed that that person didn't see the value in you. Or you could be somebody like me, is that you grew up and then your father left and you didn't get to have the or you're disappointed because you didn't get to grow up in a normal family household. Whatever it is, you tried out for your sports team and it didn't go the way you expected. You didn't have a good day at tryouts, and now you're disappointed. You thought you were going to pass that test to get into that certain program or fill out that application to get in that certain school that you wanted to get into, but it didn't happen the way you wanted to, and now you're left picking up the pieces because you're disappointed. It happens in every season of your life. It doesn't matter what it is. If you expected a certain family member to make it out of 2020, but you've never seen COVID come and it took them out, or they overdosed like my friend did out of nowhere, or died unexpectedly, and now you're left picking up the pieces, wondering how you're going to recover from the life that you thought was going to happen, but is broken into a million pieces because it's not going to turn out the way you wanted to with the people you wanted it to turn out with. And now you have to deal with that disappointment. And a lot of times, we only seek God and are only comfortable being exposed to the presence of God when we feel good, because it feels like we have something to offer him. But what I want to get across tonight is that your brokenness is more of a sacrifice in God's eyes than when you pretend to give him something good. Your brokenness is more valuable in the eyes of God. Can I tell you, we're about to read a story tonight where one of the disciples, Peter, who preached, who literally raised the dead, who casted out demons, and seen thousands and thousands of people get saved, we're going to read the story of his deepest disappointment. That God cares so much about your broken heart that he would send his son to die for you so you could have a relationship. Why? Because when you're disappointed, what happens? You always feel like you have no one to turn to, like nobody can relate to the pain, so you hide. And you don't tell anybody, and the disappointment becomes depression. And what only was supposed to be momentary creates momentum, and now is seasonal. And what is seasonal becomes permanent, and what's permanent becomes part of your identity. And now who you were is not, and who you are now because of your season of disappointment is not the same person you used to be. And you have to figure out, how do I become that person again? In John 21, the verses will be on the screen. Jesus says, or John says, in the context of this, everybody say context. Context gives us, I need everybody, let me hear this side. Context, this side, gives us power. Context gives us what? Everybody say power. Context gives us power because it gives you the full picture. A lot of times it's hard for us to see God because we only see him in pieces. This story, there's a highlight in this story. This is the story where Jesus tells Peter, put your net on the other side of the boat, and then gets a lot of fish, and that's a miracle. I don't want to talk about that. Everybody say context. I want to talk about the context, because if we read the context of the story, we get the power out of what Peter was thinking and where he was at. Because the context of this is this. Jesus died on the cross, and Peter and some of the disciples did not know he had resurrected yet. But they didn't think Jesus was going to resurrect. They thought Jesus was going to set up an earthly throne in Jerusalem and overthrow the Roman Empire and establish a kingdom on earth. That's what they expected. That's not what happened. And so when Jesus died, they were disappointed. Why? Because of their expectation wasn't met. See, when we read the Bible, we have to stop treating these people like object lessons and actually understand they're human beings that have gone through the very same things we go through. It says this in John chapter 21, verses 1 through 14. After this, Jesus revealed himself again to the disciples by the Sea of Tiberias and revealed himself in this way. Simon Peter, Thomas called the twin, Nathanael of Cana in Galilee, the sons of Zebedee, and two others of his disciples were together. Simon Peter said to them, I am going fishing. They said to him, we will go with you. They went out and got into the boat, but that night they caught, everybody say nothing. Just as day was breaking, Jesus stood on the shore, yet the disciples did not know that was Jesus. That's important. Put that in your mind and kind of like throw it in the cabinet and be like, all right, I'm going to save that for later. Everybody, if you got it, say, Jesus said to them, children, do you have any fish? They answered him, no. He said to them, this is the part I was telling you, cast the net on the right side of the boat and you will find some. So they cast it, and now they were not able to haul it in because of the large quantity of fish. That disciple who Jesus loved, which is John, the author of the story, therefore said to Peter, it is the Lord. Now check this. Simon Peter heard that it was the Lord. He put on his outer garment, stripped for work, and threw it himself in the sea. The other disciples came in the boat, dragging the net full of fish, for they were not far from the land. When they got out, they saw a charcoal fire with fish laid on it and bread. Jesus said to them, bring some fish that you have just caught. So Simon Peter went aboard and hauled the net ashore, full of large fish, 153 of them. Stay with me, I promise. It's going to get good. And although there were so many, the net was not torn. Jesus said to them, come and have breakfast. Now none of the disciples dared to ask him, who are you? After not knowing who it was. They knew it was the Lord. Jesus came and took the bread and gave it to them, and so with the fish. This was now, everybody say, the third time that Jesus was revealed to the disciples after he was raised from the dead. Let's pray. Lord Jesus, I pray for the next 2.5 hours that you would anoint this word that I'm going to share. In Jesus' name we pray. Everybody said? The first idea I want to bring out to you tonight about disappointment is this. Disappointment exposes your default. Your default in your life is the place when disappointment hits. It's the first place you retreat to. It's when everything went south, where is the first place you go? It's usually the place in isolation. When somebody passes away, somebody hurts you, things don't end up the way you wanted them to, where do you go? Because we all have it. And can I tell you this? Your default in your life will say more about your relationship with God than the good work that you ever do. Your default says more about your relationship with God than your good work ever does. Why? Because it's easy to pretend when you're doing something good because you can put on the best version of yourself. If I go on the court and score 30 points, nobody knows that I'm struggling with pornography when I leave, or I'm struggling with the fact that somebody else, they got to see the best side of me. And we think that if we do the same thing with God, everything's good and everything's okay. But God always has a way not only of seeing beyond that, but of exposing it. Because disappointment, can I tell you this? Disappointment doesn't make you into somebody better. Disappointment doesn't change you into somebody you want to become. Disappointment exposes who you are when your expectations are not met through your default. For me, when I was going through life, even before I was saved, when my dad left, it was always basketball. It was always video games. It was always things like pornography. When I got older, it was alcohol. It was drugs. It was places I could go to relieve the stress that I was going through. I didn't want to feel the pain, and I didn't even want to be myself anymore. Because disappointment has a way of making you feel like somebody you're not and making you hate the person God created you to be. And even after I got saved, my default, I had to learn in those seasons, every time I was disappointed, if I didn't catch myself slipping back into my default, my relationship with God would always backslide, always plummet, because your default is your trap. Why is this important? Because where was Peter when he faced this disappointment? He was fishing. Pastor Clinton, fishing's not so bad. But why is fishing important? Because your default, is usually the very same place God called you out of. Where did God call Peter out of? Fishing. He saw Peter when he was fishing. He said, Peter, stop fishing. I'm going to make you a fisher of men. So the first time Peter faced true disappointment because the person he loved, his mentor, his pastor, Jesus, his Messiah, died, did not fulfill his expectations. Where was the first place he went? The only place he knew best, the place God called him out of. And this is why your default says more about you than your good work ever does. Because where will you go when you're disappointed in God? When God doesn't fulfill your expectations? Listen, I love the quote, God doesn't want to meet your expectations, he wants to exceed them. But can I tell you this? We're human. We don't always ride on the mountaintop. We don't always ride on the highest wavelength. We dip, and when we dip, we go through seasons where we don't feel good. Where is our default? When we don't feel good, can I tell you? I guarantee it's the very same place God called you out of. Whether it's that depressive place, that lonely place, that place of sitting on your video games all day, that place of talking to those people who literally don't have their best in mind for you, but you would rather hang out with toxic people than be lonely. That place that fulfills your lust or that urge that's inside of you that is so sinful. Or maybe God called you to be somebody bold. And then when you feel disappointed, you go back into just pleasing everybody. I don't know what it is for your life. But when you're disappointed, the destination of your default is usually your foundation. This is why Jesus says there were two builders. And when the storm came, the person who built their foundation on the Word of God built it on a firm foundation, and the one who didn't built it on sand. Can I tell you this? The storm was coming to both of them. And can I also tell you this? When they were building, how many storms did they had to go through to build the foundation? What is your default? Your default is the foundation. Your default in the narrative of your life, in the narrative in your mind, is the place you go to feel, everybody say, comfortable. It's the place you know best. It's the place because uncomfortability, being out of your comfort zone, causes growth, causes you to stretch, causes you to get better. When you lift weights, the only way you get stronger is time under tension. And the only difference between somebody who's really strong and somebody who's just starting is not difference in exercise, it's the time under tension. And when you get to this point where disappointment is hurting you, the only difference between somebody like me is not this microphone. It's that whenever I face disappointment, I have safeguards to know that I can go to my default and be comfortable, and nobody would know. Or I could do something different. And when and I'm disappointed, I could choose Jesus. Because where we go when we're broken will be the very thing that's responsible for putting us back together. Remember when I said, you know that thing that I said, everybody say, y'all remember what it was? Y'all remember what that was? It's the second point I want to make. Disappointment will drown out and distort the voice of God. Peter, how many years did Peter hang out with Jesus? 3 years. But it was every day. Like every day. They walked. They didn't carpool. They didn't go on a road trip. They didn't fly. They weren't in the subway. They walked. So they got to know each other really, really well. How many of us, if our moms were to yell at us and we were doing something wrong and they were to yell our names from a distance, we would know who it was and we would know we were in trouble. Like, crap, my mom just caught me, shoot. My son does this funny thing. He's 2 years old, and me and my wife have realized when it's quiet, because my son, this guy talks a lot, and I get it. You're probably looking at me like, well, dude, you have a microphone in your hand. I know where he gets it from, all right? He talks a lot for a 2-year-old. And so when it's quiet in the house, we know something's up. So if 20 minutes goes by, what usually has happened is he's either got poop somewhere or he's colored on something that he shouldn't have colored on, or done something, or gotten into like a pile of clothes and threw them everywhere. And the parents know what I'm talking about, because you guys probably all did the same thing. So when my wife says, Gray Montgomery, you will literally hear him jump up from like a seated position. He's only 2 years old. He'll literally jump up from a seated position, run out like this, and look at my wife like he got caught red-handed, and we didn't even go find him. But he recognized the voice. What's interesting about this and how powerful disappointment can be is that Peter, I need y'all to remember this, because this is really deep. Peter spent 3 years with Jesus. When Jesus said, put the net on the other side of the boat, Peter didn't recognize the voice of Jesus. Peter didn't recognize the voice of somebody he had spent 3 years with. This is why context is important. Peter was so disappointed. Have you ever been so heartbroken? So heartbroken. So disappointed and discouraged and depressed. And some of my people who have a relationship with Jesus can understand. Sometimes maybe all you knew was youth group, or all you knew was church, and somebody hurt your feelings, and now you're disappointed in Jesus. Or that person in life that you loved hurt you. Because can I tell you this? My father left when I was 8. And for the longest time, it's cool now, we reconciled. But after a while, I forgot what his voice sounded like. I forgot what his voice sounded like, because it had been years. Peter went days. His disappointment, he was so disappointed in Jesus that when the person he loved and followed for 3 years tried to call out to him, he couldn't recognize his voice. Alina, can you come up? I got an illustration real quick to show you what this looks like. There was a famous doctor, a vocal cord doctor. The fancy name for it was an otolaryngologist. Don't ask me to spell that. His name was Alfred Tomatis. I said Tomatis. Not tomatoes, Tomatis. He had a case of an opera singer, a world-renowned opera singer, could not hit a note that he had been able to hit for so long. And to show you what opera sounds like, Alina's gonna, do you have it? Do you have that on? Her mic's on?
No?
There it is. All right. Alina, give us some opera real quick.
I'm so embarrassed. Okay. O mio bambino caro, a mi piaceva bello.
As high as you can go. Go as high as you can go.
Personavo che mi guardaro, oh
Y'all give Alina. Y'all think I can do better? Y'all, no. Y'all right? All right. No, I don't. All right. Fine, I'll do it. From the diaphragm. Woo! That's all you get. That's terrible. The reason the opera singer went to go see Alfred Tomatis was because he couldn't hit the note he would always hit. But every doctor he went to before thought it was a vocal cord issue. Whew, it's gonna blow your mind. He found out, and later they called it the Tomatis effect, that the opera singer had an ear problem because his voice got so loud, it was like standing next to a 747 jet on takeoff every single time. So he blew his eardrum out. Can I tell you, your voice can only reproduce your ear's ability to hear. Why was Peter feeling his disappointment? And when you feel disappointment, you stay stuck, because the answer to our disappointment is always life, is always speaking truth. But sometimes our voice cannot reproduce truth. It cannot reproduce life, because the only thing our ear can hear is not the voice of God, but the disappointment we felt. And the disappointment we went through drowns out the voice of God in our lives. And the band can come up. I got one more story that I want to share, and it's my own story of going through this. In 2017, I just graduated from the Bible college I went to in Asheboro, North Carolina. And anybody from Asheboro? Asheboro, no? Yeah, I didn't think so. You're from Asheboro? My man! In the LeBron jersey. Shout out to Klay Thompson coming back tonight. And so, yes, clapworthy. That's praiseworthy. All right. My mom developed a disease called COPD. She was a lifelong smoker, and it finally caught up to her, and she was in and out of the hospital. And when I got back, I spent time with her, hung out with her, was in the hospital with her. And I was trying to figure out what to do with my life, because I was trying to get a ministry position and do some other things. And I was in between, like, my brother wanted to start a pool company, and I almost did that with him. And I was, like, trying to figure it out. And at the same time, my mom's sick. And I remember praying every night. And I want to tell you, like, I came off the high of Bible college. Like, literally, can I tell you that I had prayed for people who literally the next day were going in for rotator cuff surgery because they couldn't move their arms. And I prayed for them, and they literally had full range of motions and had to call the surgery off. Isn't that insane? And I'm like, I've seen God do incredible things. Why can't he heal my mom? So I prayed hours for months and months and months. And I thought in the back of my mind, God, you honor faith. And I felt like God owed me something because I expected my mom to get healed. So when I was at work one day, imagine my surprise when I get the call telling me my sister has found my mom dead on the floor. All those hours praying. I'm somebody who is supposed to go into ministry, and I start questioning the foundation of my faith. My default, I realized in this moment, my default wasn't healthy. And I started questioning God, like, God, how could you let this happen? I prayed. I did everything your word says. I did everything that people taught me to do. I did. I was the standout student. I was the guy. I was doing the right thing. Why did you not heal my mom? Why? I understand if it was somebody who was lukewarm, who sits in these seats and plays around, but not me, because I gave everything. Why did she have to pass away? And there were a couple weeks where I felt resentment building up in my heart. And I felt like God spoke to me in that moment. Because a few years later, I actually had led her to have a relationship with Jesus. And God said to me in my prayer time, I had avoided God. And the moment I said, God, it wasn't, I'll be honest, it wasn't PG. This was a rated R prayer. Because I'm going to be honest, I've never been the guy. I didn't grow up in church. I'm a little rough around the edges. I do some things that'll probably shock you. If you hung out with me, it's like, do you listen to that kind of music? It just is what it is. I am who I am. But I can tell you, if I'm one thing, I'm honest and I'm real, and what you see is what you get. And when I talked to God, I was mad. And he said, you wanted your mom healed. I wanted your mom whole. And I realized in that moment that God did heal my mom. And he did take her pain away. It just didn't look like the way I expected. And I realized in that moment my disappointment was driving me and destroying me, because it was driving me to depression. And I realized that day disappointment that we face in life is one of two things. It drives you to your destruction, or it drives you to your purpose. But you have to choose the destination it goes. Because can I tell you this? Can I blow your mind for a second? Why was Peter disappointed in the first place? I know, let's have a good theology. Jesus is always right. He's perfect. But we're not. And when we're disappointed, we become, because everybody has also told me, like anyone who's ever wronged you, you've probably had the friend who's like, you have the right to be angry. You have the right to be mad at them. You have the right to be upset at them and not talk to them, right? We've all had those friends, right? I felt like that to God because I felt like he wronged me. And I felt like I had the right to be mad. Peter felt that same way. Peter went back to his default. What was God's rule? When Peter was disappointed with Jesus, what was Jesus' response? Because how this can change everything for you. Because a lot of times when we think about God, we think when we mess up, when we slip up, when we screw up, when we do things that are out of character, that we know we shouldn't, over and over and over again. And those moments of sin become habits of sin, and it starts to become a lifestyle. And we think if we were ever to be honest and tell people what was really going on inside of our heart, that God would be so mad at us that he would never take us back, that he would never give us another chance, that he would never offer us the same grace that Pastor Clinton talks about or other people talk about, that God couldn't do that with me because what I've done is so bad. But can I tell you that the person who denied Jesus 3 times in his disappointment in Jesus, the very same person he walked with for 3 years, did not hide away from him in that moment, but instead pursued him. Because disappointment doesn't deter God from pursuing you. God is not scared or angry or mad or indifferent when you're disappointed. Because let's be honest, we all went through a crappy couple of years. We've all seen people pass away that we've loved. We're mad at God. Like, it's like, it literally felt like we had a group chat and we're like, God, where are you at? And he left us on red. God, what are you doing? But he never stopped. Because the way he wants to do things is always better. And sometimes walking through disappointment is how we find the plan that God actually has for us.